Hi, this is Autohaus Hamilton TV, and I'm James. On time or your money back. In this video, I will talk about control arms and bushes, the not-so-missing links in the suspension system. Put the titles right here. So far, I've talked about springs, which are the shock absorbers, and might be torsion bars, and shock absorbers, which are the dampers, and also sway bars, which reduce sway and might also be torsion bars. Tying it all together are the control arms and suspension bushes. Control arms is a loose description covering wishbones, A-arms, and all the other arms which allow the suspension system to articulate and work together to maintain a more or less functional suspension geometry over the suspension system's range of motion. The simplest suspension used by Porsche over the years may have been in the classic 911, and the most physically complex may have been the rear axle of the 993. The classic 911, like all subsequent 911s, used a McPherson strut system for the front of the car, with a rear suspension design that consisted of a trailing arm and a spring plate to connect the torsion bar to the rear wheel carrier. Simple and strong, in a sports car that made virtues of simplicity and strength. By the time the 993 came along, the 911 was a far more sophisticated vehicle than it had been in previous generations, and this was most clearly apparent in the car's rear suspension design. Where the 964 suspension design had replaced torsion bars with coil springs, the 993 went much further and adopted a multi-arm rear suspension design with a plethora of adjustments aimed at ensuring that the car's suspension kept the wheels pointed in the correct direction at all times.
Would you say I have a plethora of piñatas?
A what?
A plethora.
Oh, yes. You have a plethora.
No small task when you consider that under enthusiastic driving, body roll means that all four wheels are potentially moving in different directions relative to one another. So complex is the 993's rear suspension design that subsequent generations of 911 have mechanically less complicated rear suspension designs. That's probably because from the 997 onwards, the complexity has been built into the car's electronics, with technologies such as switchable shock absorbers and sway bars. Let's take a look at some of these control arms. This is a replacement front control arm for a 964. 964s and 993s use similar front control arms. McPherson strut design means there is no upper control arm. There are bushes where the control arm joins the body, and these bushes consist of a rubber compound inside a metal body. Their job is to cushion the body of the car and its occupants from the worst of the shocks and jolts from uneven road surfaces. Porsche designed these control arms to have removable and replacement ball joints at their outboard end, but expected the arms themselves to be consumable items. At $1,300 each for a 964, that's some fairly conspicuous consumption. Fortunately, there are aftermarket manufacturers providing considerably less expensive alternatives. Even more fortunately, there are specialist manufacturers who provide replacement bushes, as long as you have a hydraulic press to remove the old bushes and press in the new ones. This is the equivalent part of a 996 or 986 Boxster, and 997 and 987s are very similar. In this generation of cars, the control arm has become two control arms. This coffin arm, which is a term you won't find in any official Porsche diagram, so called because of its outline, no longer has any inherent fore and aft strength. Think of the forces on this arm when the brakes are applied. In this design, the strength comes from what Porsche calls an upper link, which is odd, as there isn't a lower link. I call it a lateral arm. It has a joint where it connects to the front subframe crossmember, and it connects to a rubber bush joint in the coffin arm. If your car is making suspension noises when driving over cat's eyes at low speed, chances are one of these arms is to blame. To finish our look at control arms, these are the front lower arms of a Cayenne. Unlike every 911, the Cayenne has a double wishbone front suspension design. That's the same basic front suspension design as a Formula One car. The lower car is built to take most of the punishment. It's strong, and it weighs about as much as a small hatchback. Replacement bushes are available for these, here and here, but the ball joints at this end are not replaceable, so the arms usually end up being replaced as required. The upper wishbone is all lightness and delicacy, and it is also replaced as required. Finally, a closer look at bushes. Bushes are rubber or rubber-like mountings that prevent metal-to-metal contact in order to insulate the vehicle's occupants from harshness. That insulation comes at the price of some loss of precision in suspension control. Now, unless the bushes have the consistency of marshmallow, that loss of precision is small enough that you, as the driver, still know what the car is doing. You'll find bushes at the ends of control arms, on spring plates in classic 911s, on sway bar drop links, and between sway bars and the brackets that hold them against the car's body. Race car suspensions often replace bushes with rose joints. Rose joints do away with a flexible bush and have metal-to-metal joints. They can be harsher, they likely transmit more road noise to the cabin, and they're likely to need more maintenance. But they do provide better control. For a race car, the drawbacks are outweighed by the advantage of increased control. For a road car, the major advantage of rose joints is being able to look your mates in the eye over a coffee and say, with a completely straight face, because race car. As ever, thank you very much for watching.